Welcome to our channel HASHMICLINICS.
Imagine a hunger so profound that it doesn't just, make your stomach growl. It actually fundamentally alters your moral compass.
Right, which sounds impossible, but
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but we're talking about a physical state that makes you cruel, paranoid, and prone to just swearing at total strangers.
it's a really wild concept.
It is. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you're joining us because we are opening up a stack of medical history today that completely blurs the line between physical illness and psychological breakdown.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at the personal notes of Prof. Dr. Rifat Hashmi, alongside these excerpts from classic Materia Medica. And they're all centered around a single, highly unusual subject. It's a plant called Anacardium orientale, which is commonly known as the marking nut or the Malacca bean.
And our mission today is really to move past just, listing out the clinical symptoms documented in these texts. We want to understand the actual mechanisms behind them.
Right.
Because we are exploring a remedy profile that paints one of the most vivid, paradoxical, and almost like a Jekyll and Hyde picture of human suffering ever recorded in this medical tradition.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you have ever felt torn between two decisions, or if you've ever experienced extreme hanger.
Oh, yeah, the classic hanger.
Right. You know, that blinding, irrational anger that comes from just desperately needing a sandwich? Well, this deep dive is going to take those highly relatable concepts and push them to an unbelievable clinical extreme.
It really does take it to the furthest possible edge.
So let's start with the mind. That's the most striking feature jumping out of these sources. The texts describe a profound psychological schism. They call it a literal illusion of duality.
Yes, and the language used in these historical notes is incredibly evocative. The patient feels like they have two distinct wills operating simultaneously.
Two wills.
Yeah. One will is commanding them to do what the other strictly forbids. It's documented almost like a delusion of having an angel on one shoulder and a demon on the other. Or the patient feels entirely separated from the world, walking around thinking they are quite literally double.
I mean, it sounds like a classic cartoon trope, right? The little devil with the pitchfork whispering in one ear, while the angel with the halo whispers in the other.
Exactly.
But this is a documented clinical state they were observing and treating. And according to the sources, this inner conflict stems from a pathological inferiority complex.
Right, a really deep one.
The person feels deeply humiliated or worthless, but simultaneously they have this desperate burning urge to prove themselves.
And what's fascinating here is how that specific collision of feelings creates the pathology. When you have a profound lack of self-confidence crashing at high speed into an intense desire to be validated, the internal clash is just devastating.
It just tears them apart.
Exactly. It consumes all of the patient's cognitive resources. The literature notes that this clash ultimately results in a total loss of moral sentiment.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The patient develops cruelty, malice, hard-heartedness, and, well, this is one of the most famous guiding symptoms of this specific remedy profile, an irresistible desire to curse and swear.
Okay, I have to push back on this because it feels incredibly counterintuitive. I'm looking at these notes and I'm just struggling to connect those dots.
I get that. It seems like a leap.
Are we saying that a doctor is prescribing an extract from a nut to stop people from using foul language?
Yeah.
Like, how does an inferiority complex mechanistically lead to someone uncontrollably cursing?
Well, it's not that the remedy is a cure for bad manners, and it's certainly not about treating low morals. The texts are very specific that this profanity is only amenable to the drug when it is the result of a profound mental breakdown.
Oh, okay, so it's a symptom of something breaking.
Exactly. What the practitioners observed was that the patient's external will, which is their executive function, becomes essentially paralyzed.
So the cruelty is essentially an armor plating for a fragile ego. Their internal filter, the part of the brain that says, hey, maybe don't scream obscenities right now, is completely short-circuited.
That's spot on. The unbearable inner conflict and low self-esteem manifest outwardly as a total detachment from empathy.
Wow.
The texts describe them laughing hysterically at serious matters and then remaining deadpan and serious over things that are actually funny.
Because everything is backwards for them.
Right. Their emotional responses are entirely inverted because their internal system is so overloaded by the war between their two wills.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
The swearing and the cruelty aren't the primary disease. They are They're like the exhaust fumes of a mind that is constantly at war with itself.
That's a great way to put it.
But if the mind is burning that much energy sustaining a dual personality war, the biological system has to pay the toll. What does that physiological bankruptcy actually look like?
It looks like a massive cognitive collapse. The texts refer to this as brain fag.
Brain fag.
Yeah, the nervous system just entirely depletes itself.
The details and the sources here are almost tragic. There's a sudden, profound loss of memory. The patient forgets everything so quickly that it reaches a level of severe absent-mindedness.
Oh, it's extreme.
There's a specific note here about someone making a purchase at a store, paying for it, and just walking away without the item. And the literature heavily highlights something called examination funk.
Ah, the absolute dread of the student.
Right. And I want to be clear about how this differs from normal test anxiety. I mean, we've all blanked on an exam or felt butterflies. But this is described as a complete wipeout.
Total paralysis.
Students who are terrified of failure sit down for a test and their reality just fractures. Or on the other end of the age spectrum, it's noted in older people dealing with senile dementia.
Right.
Everything starts to seem like a dream to them. And then their physical senses literally start to diminish. Sight, hearing, smell, they all dial down.
But here's where the pathology gets highly complex, because as those real physical senses diminish, the mind fills the void with sensory illusions.
And the illusions are wildly specific. The texts mention clairaudience.
Hearing things that aren't there.
Yeah, hearing voices of the dead or people who are far away. Or this visual illusion, which is genuinely terrifying. Looking into a mirror and seeing everyone's face in the reflection, except your own.
That one always gives me chills.
It's like a horror movie. Or smelling imaginary, bizarre odors.
The olfactory illusions are highly documented in Hashmi's notes and the Materia Medica. The smell of burning tinder, or specifically, pigeon's dung.
Pigeon's dung. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of this collapse. It sounds exactly like a computer freezing up because there are too many heavy background programs running.
That's a perfect analogy.
The two wills fighting each other are eating up all the system's RAM, so the basic memory functions just crash. The hard drive is still there, the information exists, but you can't access the files because the processor is overloaded with conflict.
Exactly.
So the system starts throwing up error codes, which in human terms are these bizarre sensory illusions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, your RAM analogy aligns perfectly with how these historical practitioners viewed the nervous system. The cognitive collapse is the absolute linchpin of the anacardium state.
The linchpin.
Yeah. The text actually makes a special note of this. It says that restoring the memory often cures the patient of all their other trouble.
I'm struggling to see how that works in reverse. Fixing the memory fixes the cruelty and the swearing.
It does seem backwards.
It feels strange that a cognitive function like memory would be the main control lever for a behavioral issue like malice.
Well, it works because the memory loss is the ultimate symptom of that exhausted RAM. The memory isn't the root cause, it's the loudest alarm bell.
Oh, I see.
When the practitioner treats the mental exhaustion, the systemic tension drops. The internal war ceases, the mind reboots, the executive function comes back online, and therefore the moral filter returns.
The armor comes down.
Right. And once that mental tension breaks, the physical body follows suit.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because that intense mental tension, the crashing of the nervous system, doesn't just stay confined to the brain.
No, it spreads.
It doesn't just stay in the realm of bad memory or smelling burning tinder. That psychological stuckness drops down into the physical body and manifests as highly specific, bizarre constrictions.
Because in this medical tradition, the mind and body are an unbroken continuum.
I want to pull you, the listener, into this for a second. Think about the last time you were incredibly stressed out. Maybe you felt a literal tightness in your chest or a lump in your throat.
Very common.
Now multiply that sensation by 10 and imagine wrapping it around your joints or your internal organs. That is the physical reality documented for the anacardium patient.
It's an agonizing state to be in.
The texts highlight two major guiding physical sensations, the sensation of a plug and the sensation of a hoop or band.
These are the hallmark physical indicators in the Materia Medica.
Let's look at the plug first. It's described as a dull pressure felt in inner parts, like a blunt plug in the eyes, the head, the spine, or the intestines.
Very localized pressure.
Most notably, a paralyzed rectum that feels, quote, plugged up, causing an ineffectual desire to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And then there's the band, a sensation of a tight hoop around a part of the body, like the knees feeling so tightly bandaged that they are practically paralyzed and the patient can barely walk.
Just completely locked up.
I marvel at the specificity of these words. Why a plug? Why a hoop? What is the actual physiological mechanism happening here?
That is the crucial question. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, when much of this was being codified, they used the term neurasthenia, which translates to nervous exhaustion.
Okay.
Today, we might look at this through the lens of the autonomic nervous system.
Specifically the sympathetic nervous system, right? The fight or flight response.
Precisely. When a patient is locked in that illusion of duality, constantly fighting themselves, their sympathetic nervous system goes into severe chronic overdrive.
It's just always on.
Right. Physiologically, what happens during fight or flight? Blood vessels restrict. Fascia, which is the connective tissue around your muscles and organs, tightens up immensely to prepare the body for physical trauma.
So the body is bracing for an impact that never actually comes.
Exactly. And because the nervous system is so depleted, it starts misfiring. It sends false signals of localized paralysis.
Wow.
The patient experiences this extreme, localized fascial tightening and vascular restriction subjectively as a blunt plug or a tight metal hoop.
Because they don't have better words for it.
Yes. The subjective sensation perfectly mirrors their psychological state. They are emotionally constricted, they are intellectually stuck, so their body literally acts out the metaphor of the mind.
That is wild. So you have a patient who is mentally tortured by dual wills, their memory is crashing, they're isolating themselves with a cruel, profane exterior, and physically, their nervous system is clamping down so hard, they feel like they have blunt plugs pressing into their spine and tight metal bands wrapped around their knees.
It's a picture of absolute unyielding tension.
Which leads to the most pressing question in these notes. How does this tension ever break? How does this patient find relief? Because the answer provided in the sources defies all conventional expectations.
It really does. The relief mechanism is incredibly surprising.
It's eating. All of these symptoms, the headache, the horrible dyspepsia, the mental cruelty, the memory loss, the illusion of the devil on the shoulder, they are all temporarily relieved by eating a meal.
It's fascinating. The notes describe an empty, all-gone feeling in the stomach that drives a frantic need to eat.
They just have to have food immediately.
Right. The patient doesn't just casually dine. They swallow food hastily. They eat in such a rush they might actually choke.
And while digestion is happening, they are happy. They're completely symptom-free. But 2 or 3 hours later, when the stomach is empty again, the nightmare returns.
Like clockwork.
The text explicitly contrasts this with another famous remedy profile, nux vomica, where the stomach pain is worse during digestion.
Yes, very important distinction.
But for anacardium, digestion is the only piece they get. And just to highlight how systemic this is, the sources mention that anacardium is also known for intense itching, similar to poison oak, and for warts on the palms of the hands.
Yeah, skin symptoms too.
And even these skin symptoms are somehow linked to this cycle. They are aggravated by hot water and by empty stomachs.
Everything comes back to the stomach being empty versus full.
I just keep coming back to the mechanics of this. We talked about being hangry at the top of the deep dive, but this is hanger on a clinical level.
Truly.
Eating a sandwich temporarily cures a split personality. Mechanistically, how is that possible?
This raises an important question about the mind-gut connection. Modern science is constantly uncovering how our microbiome and enteric nervous system impact our mood, but these historical texts observed the mechanical reality of it over a century ago.
They saw it happening.
Exactly. The digestive process acts as a massive physical grounding mechanism.
Grounding, like drawing excess electricity away from a lightning rod and burying it in the earth.
That is exactly what is happening physiologically. When the stomach is full, the body has to redirect an enormous amount of blood flow and nervous energy down into the gut to process that meal.
Because digestion takes a lot of work.
Digestion is incredibly resource-intensive.
So for the patient whose brain is overloaded with that ram-crashing conflict of two wills, this sudden redirection of resources is a forced system override.
It's a biological circuit breaker. It literally pulls the nervous energy and blood flow out of the head and into the stomach.
Oh, wow.
The physiological act of digestion temporarily starves the psychological conflict of the energy it needs to run. The patient is forced to be in their body doing a basic biological task, which quiets the demons in their mind and relaxes the tight fascia, creating those plugs and bands.
That makes perfect sense.
But of course, once the food is processed and the energy returns to the nervous system,
the cycle starts all over again. The conflict reboots.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? Let's take a step back and look at the whole journey we've charted today through these fascinating notes.
It's been quite a journey.
We started with the illusion of duality, the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. We saw how that internal war drains the mind, leading to the brain fog of the terrified student and the terrifying sensory illusions.
Right.
We explored how that mental tension drops into the body, causing the sympathetic nervous system to clamp down, creating those bizarre internal plugs and hoops. And finally, we saw the miraculous, if temporary, relief of a full stomach redirecting that chaotic energy.
It is a remarkable progression that truly shows how a wounded sense of self doesn't just stay in your head.
No, it takes over everything.
It changes your digestion, it alters your nervous system, and it can even change how you interact with the mirror. Symptoms are often just the body's desperately creative way of expressing an emotional truth that the mind refuses to process.
That is such a powerful way to put it.
And I want to leave you with one final poetic detail from the source material that really ties this entire profile together.
Oh, I love these. Let's hear it.
We mentioned the plant itself earlier, the Anacardium nut. If you look at it in nature, the physical nut is shaped exactly like a human heart.
Wait, really? An actual heart shape?
Precisely. And isn't it a fascinating irony of nature that a medicine derived from a heart-shaped nut is the exact remedy described in these texts for a patient suffering from extreme cruelty, hatred, and a total loss of heart or moral feeling?
Wow.
Could the physical shape of the plant be a mirror to the empathy the patient is so desperately missing?
That is incredible. And it leaves you with something to investigate in your own life. The next time you experience an unexplained physical ache, a sudden tightness in your chest, or a flash of inexplicable anger when you're hungry.
We've all been there.
Right. Ask yourself, what emotional truth is your body trying to process that your mind is currently ignoring? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Professor Dr. Rifat Hashmi is a distinguished homeopathic physician, educator, and researcher with over 4 decades of clinical and teaching experience. He is widely respected for his deep command of Materia Medica, repertory, and constitutional prescribing, combined with a practical, patient-centered approach. Dr. Hashmi has dedicated his career to training generations of homeopathic doctors, blending classical principles with modern clinical insight. He is also known for his innovative work in digital homeopathy, developing educational content, clinical tools, and AI-assisted systems to enhance remedy selection and case analysis. With a strong commitment to ethical practice and lifelong learning, Professor Dr. Rifat Hashmi continues to guide, inspire, and elevate the standards of homeopathic education and patient care.